Good evening. This is a call to order for the Teaching and Learning Committee of the Board of Education. Today's date is Wednesday, April 26, 2023. The time now is 6:27 p.m. My name is Christine Baptiste Perez. I'm the chair. And we're going to, in attendance, we have committee member, Mr. Robert Traber. We have board member, Joseph Sokolovic. And then online, we have board member, Mr. David Jellin. Did I pronounce that correctly? Not, correct me later. We're going to move on to the first item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes from February 23rd, 2023.
Move to accept the minutes.
I will second it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions?
Same.
The ayes have it. 1 out of 2.
I have.
The minutes have been approved. We're now going to move to the second item on the agenda, which is a report and discussion of the latest available assessment data for reading, writing, mathematics, and science, and strategies to support student learning deficits. So we have two presentations. The first one I have is Dr. Jenkins. We're going to pull it up, and then Dr. Jenkins, you get to have a seat next to me in the lovely hot seat. And just let us know when you're ready.
Let's see this.
Good evening. It's an honor to present and share with you the current English language arts data and instructional supports for children. I apologize that the date on this PowerPoint slide is not current. I did update, but digitally it did not take. So today is Wednesday, April 26, 2023. The agenda for the presentation is to report and discuss the latest available assessment data for reading and writing and strategies to support student learning deficits. I wanted to create a context for looking at the data, and I provided in your board packet a link to a paper that was written titled Teaching Reading is Truly Rocket Science. That paper is written by Dr. Moults, Learning Deficit. So I am going to take some time to share with you. I wanted to create a context.
Can I hear?
The people online?
I wanted to take a moment to create a context for the data.
Excuse me, it's breaking up.
Just 1 second, Dr. Jenkins, while we make sure everything is technically sound for the viewers.
That was Arlene who just said it was breaking up.
and speak again, please.
So I'm going to read the two excerpts because I believe it's important to set the context for the data. For children growing up in under-resourced communities and attending under-resourced schools, the incidence of reading failure is astronomical and completely unacceptable. Students who are African American, Hispanic, learning English and/or from impoverished homes fall behind and stay behind in far more greater proportion than students who are white and middle class. The rate of weak reading skills in these groups is 60 to 70%, according to the National Assessment of Education Progress. For best results, the teacher must instruct the majority of students directly, systematically, and explicitly to decipher words in print, all the while keeping in mind the ultimate purpose of reading, which is to learn, enjoy, and understand. To accommodate children's variability, the teacher must assess children and tailor lessons to individuals or groups. This includes interpreting errors, giving corrective feedback, selecting examples to illustrate concepts, explaining new ideas in several ways, and connecting word recognition instruction to meaningful reading and writing. I wanted to take the time to share these two quotes that really stood out from this paper because, one, I wanted to make sure we understand the context in which we're striving to make sure all children achieve. But I also want you to understand the national context and how we often mirror that national context, but also understand what the teachers have embarked on the last 2 years on the other side of the pandemic to create opportunity for learning in the classroom. So I will be presenting reading data using the reading assessment called DIBELS. DIBELS stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills, and I will provide some overview on the Smarter Balance Assessment. The first slide is small from your perspective, but it's a slide presenting the academic growth from the Next Generation Accountability Report. This reflects the Smarter Balance Assessment. The target for this assessment or this portion of this indicator is 100%. So students, all ELA students over the last 5 years, the growth has hovered around 60%. So last year, 60.4% of all students in grades 3 through 8 demonstrated growth on the Smarter Balance Assessment. That basically says that 40% of our students did not demonstrate growth on that assessment. In regards to the orange line, last year in 2021, 56.2% of our students demonstrated growth who are identified as high needs. Students receiving services, students who are receiving special ed services, students who are receiving English language learner services, or students who are eligible for free or reduced price lunch. So we haven't had a lot of growth. So that's an area we hope to see and target during this year. I did not share the achievement indicator, but chose to show you the growth indicator because it carries more weight when it comes to our Next Generation Accountability Index. In regards to reading data, the most current reading data for this school year, as measured by the DIBELS assessment for all students in grades K through 8. September, we administer the beginning of year universal screener data. These numbers, or these percentages, represent the percentage of students reading at or above grade level based on the composite score, because there are a lot of little subtests, but this is the overall score. So about 30 to 35% of our children, depending on the grade level, are reading on or above grade level across grades K through 8. The next slide represents subtest data for students in grades K through 3. Our goal is to have all children reading on or above grade level by 3rd grade. So in order to monitor student progress, we look at various subtests. One of the subtests is letter naming fluency, LNF. We want to make sure students know their letters fluently. Students are timed in reading their letters 1 minute. All of these assessments are 1 minute to make sure students demonstrate fluency. Beginning of the year data for letter naming fluency was 23%. Middle of the year was 34% of children knowing their letter names fluently. Phonemic segmentation fluency. At the beginning of the year, 14% of our students had their sounds down and, mastered. By middle of the year, it was 17%. The growth for that middle of the year assessment was high. It is our expectation that students will grow even more in identifying sounds. Nonsense word fluency, NWF, correct letter sounds, combines their letter name knowledge, knowing the letter by sight, with knowing their sounds, mapping sounds onto letters. So nonsense word fluency, you see the results. Anything I highlighted in green represents growth from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year. Nonsense word fluency, words recoded correctly. So students are blending at this time to put words together. And then word reading fluency measures sight word proficiency, knowing their words when they see them. They don't really have to sound them out. So the green, as I mentioned to you, shows growth at the subtest level. This slide for reading data represents students in grades K through 4. I wanted to share with you, based on middle of year data collection points, some growth across cohorts. So in 2020, 2021, we started administering the DIBELS assessment in the pandemic, and baseline data for that year is present. Children who were in kindergarten in 2020, 2021 demonstrated growth when they were in 1st grade from 9% to 24%. And then the children who were in 1st grade in 2021, 2022 demonstrated growth when they went to 2nd grade, where they are now by 35%. The growth is slow, but it is definitely represents significant growth for students across grades K, 1, and 2 from year 1, 2, and 3. Additionally, I put up in the right-hand corner, the teachers in grades K through 3 have had intentional focused professional development on the science of reading for the last 2 years. So if you look across kindergarten, you see growth. You look across 1st grade, you see growth. And that growth is reflective of the teachers learning what I had described on that slide, learning how to assess, how to adjust instruction to the variability that occurs in the classroom with having students receiving services, students who are English language learners, students that may be new to a country, students that may have moved. So this data represents growth across cohorts for grades K through 4. At this time, I'm going to speak briefly about ELA writing data. Last year, you requested writing data. So this year, I have launched with leaders and teachers the effort to collect writing data. So I'm going to speak to the writing data we've collected for grades 7 and 8, and speak to our efforts to collect writing data across grades 9 through 12 before the end of the school year. We launched formal data collection of students writing learning with grades 7 and 8 this year. Approximately 74%, 2,549 of the students have submitted 2 writing samples for formal scoring this year. They have written a narrative writing piece and an informative explanatory writing sample. Each teacher receives a class report understanding student strengths and areas for improvement based on writing that's uploaded into a database. This writing is scored by college students from across the country. It is not scored with artificial intelligence. So teachers receive reports back identifying strengths and areas for improvement for each and every student. The writing is scored for their statement of purpose, organization, elaboration, language use, and conventions. An aggregate of scores for each area of writing is available in the future. I did go over the writing results with the middle school administrators today, as well as making sure that they understood how to monitor students' writing in the completion of the third writing sample for this year. I met with the high school principals yesterday, and we have a plan to collect writing samples from high school students grades 9 through 12. The next step is to formalize a process to collect writing data from grades K through 6. We actually purchased a program called Marco Learning, where the teachers upload the writing to this program, and someone from, like I said, a university is actually reading and scoring the writing and providing feedback to our children. This section will provide you with an overview of students' performance on the SAT and PSAT, as well as Reading Plus for grades 9 through 12. This chart is a chart of documenting a cohort growth for the class of 2024 in our high schools. It shows growth for evidence-based reading and writing. That's the subtest for the PSAT, SAT. The results for 2023 is in navy blue, 2022 is orange, and royal blue is for 2021. The benchmark score for PSAT grade 9 is 410. For PSAT 10, 430. For SAT is 480. So if you look closely, most of our students performing at Central High School, IT, Biotech, and Aero have met or exceeded the benchmark, but I put the number of students above the bar graph. So at Central, that data represents 128 students in that cohort. At IT, 52, Biotech, 34, and Aero, 20. While our schools, VMA, Bassick, and Harding, the students may not have met in this cohort, may not have met the benchmark. What is recognized is the growth for the cohort of students at BMA, Bassick, and Harding. And those are schools that are currently receiving school improvement grants. So we will begin to focus even more specifically and intently in supporting all students. But I wanted to give you a snapshot of cohort data because growth does matter across time. For all the students that even if they change schools, this data that I'm about to speak to for PSAT, evidence-based reading and writing across grades, across the years, fall 2020, fall 2021, and fall 2022. It represents different cohorts, but it's an aggregate of all the students. I provide you with the sample size as well. So the average score, which is in the far right-hand corner, far right-hand column, for the district for fall 2020 was 415, fall 2021 was 415 again, but for this fall 2022, that average score dropped to 402. I provided for you the comparison to the state average as well. The percentage of children meeting or exceeding benchmark for the district, fall 2020, 30%, fall 2021, 31%, and fall 2022, 26%. The approaching benchmark in the column of strengthening skills shows the percentage of students that need to strengthen their skills, as well as the percentage of students that are approaching benchmark for the district. At a meeting for students and families, I had shared the Reading Plus data that we have collected for students in grades 9 through 12. Reading Plus is administered at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, and will be administered at the end of the year. I'm sharing with you middle of the year data for high school. There are approximately 23% of our students are reading at or above grade level as measured by Reading Plus. We have 9% reading, below grade level, 1 grade level below. We have 9% reading 2 or more grade levels, 2 grade levels below. And then we have, unfortunately, at this time, 59% below grade level, 3 or more grade levels, as measured by Reading Plus. At this time, I'm going to speak to some of the systemic changes to support students' reading achievement. Often we talk about it as closing the gap, but in the literature now and the research, there's more information about creating opportunities to learn, grade level, have grade level tasks in front of them. So we want to create opportunities for students who are at risk of not reading on grade level by 3rd grade. And we want to create opportunities for students who enter the district at any time during a K-12 learning experience. Then a variety of systems or processes must be put in place for each student. Because one of our challenges, students may start with us, but they don't go into our high school. Approximately 50 to 60% of our students who enter high school are new to Bridgeport. So in order to support all students, no matter when they enter, we need to put a variety of systems or processes in place to support each student. So I'm working with directors, working with district leadership, school leaders, teachers, looking to put multi-tiered systems of support in place. So making sure we always have an academic screener. We have not always had an academic screener for high school. So we've seen the PSAT results, but we've never really understood what happens during the year and can we grow children across time. So maintaining an academic screener for grades 9 through 12. Use data to inform instructional decisions, teaching teachers, teaching leaders how to use data to make decisions, instructional decisions to improve student learning. Providing professional development to make sure high quality evidence-based instruction is used. I know that everyone likes to use the internet, but everything on the internet isn't evidence-based. So making sure that the professional development we provide to teachers is evidence-based and that they're using evidence-based instructional practices at all times that will accelerate and help children gain more than 1 year of growth in school. Making sure, administrators monitor that high quality instruction that teachers deliver, provide additional support if staffing is available, if we have interventionists, if we have bilingual program assistants, making sure they understand how to collect data, how to use data, that everyone that's working with children are part of that system for professional development and instruction. Creating a system where families are engaged in the instructional plan. What can they do at home to support students as well? And then progress monitoring needs to occur in between the universal screener. So if we're doing universal screening in September, January, and May, we can't wait 3 or 4 months, we need to make sure we're progress monitoring and using formative assessments at the classroom level to adjust instruction to make sure growth is occurring. So that means that the financial system must support each one of these components in the cycle. That means that we have to have time for each component in the cycle. That means we have to have adult learning for each component in the cycle, and we need additional human resources for each component in the cycle. So there are multi-layers of support for a system. So I mentioned systemic changes to consider. I mentioned professional development. We will have a summer program for our children in K-3. And then we've leveraged technology by making sure we have some additional technological resources due to the fact we may not always have human resources. And I mentioned this during Students and Families, but I will mention it again. Connecticut has passed the Right to Read Act to support students in grades K-3 across the state, because what I described at the beginning around teaching reading being rocket science, many states across the country have decided to pass right to read legislation to make sure we're using evidence-based practices to teach children, with the goal of making sure children read at or above grade level by the end of 3rd grade. So teachers and school leaders have had intensive professional development the last 2 years around the science of reading, universal screening. We've been able to purchase high quality instructional materials. We have a solid reading program, Reading Wonders. We have the Easy Teachers that are currently working to support and provide additional instruction and interventions. We progress monitor students. There's coaching available for teachers across the district and coaching available for leaders. We have a pretty robust summer program. I believe our students will have about 39 extra hours of reading instruction during this summer. And we have worked to communicate with parents about this program. Even the district has provided Lighthouse. We've paid for the children to attend Lighthouse, so if they go to summer school, parent doesn't have to leave work in the middle of the day to pick them up. They can stay and go through the Lighthouse program. So trying to minimize barriers for children to not attend. And we've even identified like fun things we can do each day with the children, bubble day, sidewalk chalk day, so they'll have a moment to have some fun during their intensive experience. But I think that Bridgeport is a trailblazer with the Connecticut Right to Read implementation. And I wanted to highlight the commitment of the teachers and leaders to making this work a reality for us in Bridgeport Public Schools.
I'll open the floor up if there's any questions, first to committee members and then to members of the board.
No, I think, Doctor, you answered most of my questions. I skimmed the article this afternoon. I noticed in the summary at the beginning, they mentioned remedial options being critical, especially at the lower grade levels before they get too far behind. And as we discussed the other night, that's been my experience, that the districts that have the resources intervene immediately when they identify a problem and intervene to the level that's needed to correct the problem, whether it's in weeks or months, but to deal with the problem as soon as they notice it. And that seems to me to be the goal that we would aspire to. Clearly, you're working towards it based on this presentation, but it would be nice if we could get some more money. That's my theme in all of these meetings. It would be nice if we had more resources to dedicate to those interventions. And you sort of finished with that too, I noticed, with the interventionists. So it's the right direction. We just could use some more. tools at our disposal to try and deal with the volume of problems that our kids have.
Thank you, Mr. Traver. Mr. Sokolovic?
Mr. Jelen? I was wondering if Mr. Jelen was added to the committee or not.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I got a couple of questions. When you're measuring the growth, we're measuring the growth of all children, whether they're behind or on target or above?
Yes, we're measuring the growth of all children.
All children.
Yes.
And as far as the PSATs, I noticed that we're trending in the same direction of the state. And I noticed as we get into more years that the students suffered through the pandemic and online learning, there's a slide there in both data sets. So
Yes.
I think that might be a function of the thing. Next question is, as far as our assessment programs and the programs we're using, have they been gauged for accuracy against the state exams?
Right now, we're in the process of matching Reading Plus data to the PSAT 9, which has been returned. It's been showing some pretty good match in
Right.
accuracy, pretty good correlation, high correlation. We also have been matching, say, for the older students, Reading Plus data to their writing performance, because reading and writing are the two sides of the same coin. So
Right.
yes, we're doing that.
Okay, yeah, because I had a parent, this might be just a single case, I had a parent bring to my attention that the child was like on the Reading Plus, a couple of levels below, and then 2 or 3 months later with the PSATs, he was like maybe 1 point short of being on level for college. So that seemed like a pretty wide disparity right there between the two. I was just wondering, and I think it was the same thing as math, and it seems like the growth was just too quick. And okay, that's,
Great intervention.
Bob, can you raise your voice a little bit so everyone?
yeah, I apologize. Would you like me to repeat? Do I need to repeat what I said?
No.
Okay, and my next question is, all these interventions, the Reading Plus, how much of this is covered in ESSER funding?
All of it.
All of it. So when ESSER funding comes, if there's no replacement, how are we gonna pay for this?
Based in my hope is, and I have to speak with his parent and, our CFO. I read that we can purchase multi-year contracts. And so for some of the products that we have multi-year contracts already. So if funding allows, we would strive to purchase a multi-year contract if pricing allows to create sustainability. So for many of our resources, we currently probably would be set for 4 or 5 years
Awesome.
for many.
And final question, as far as the new state mandate, how much funding came with that?
As of now, none, but the Connecticut legislature is meeting to, I guess, and they would vote if they're going to provide additional funding. I think we will get some funding for approximately 2 years. That's the forecast.
Oh, that would be great. And then if any state legislators or anybody's listening, I would implore you every time you pass a mandate to attach funding with it in perpetuity, because if we can't pay for the funds, if they don't provide the funds, we got to take it from somewhere else. So it's all well and good to pass a law, and this is great. All children should have the right to read. All students should have the right to instruction and the parents in the language that they have. But when you pass these laws, you got to fund it. Thank you. Soapbox off.
Mr.
Jelen?
Jelen, any questions, comments? Okay. I'll move on to myself. I'll say from this report from last year to this year, I'm really happy, especially one of the slides, to see the growth of each cohort going down. How kindergarten was at 9%, but now those first graders were at 24%. And now in the third grade, we're seeing 35%. That's that continual increase. And our elementary school, that foundation, we'll see the long-term effect through the grade levels. And I won't stand on the soapbox long either, but that's the investment that we put with our training, our teachers, the resources. That all came from the Covert ESSER funds. And I want to thank you, and I know Dr. Planis, Mr. Planis from last year, for emphasizing the growth factor for our children. And that it's not only about passing the test, but you got to get there. And how are we going to get there? So it's about the journey. And this is good. And I mean, there's still areas for growth, but to see that we are getting a return on our investment is there. And so we need to continually have investments. Are there any, Mr. Traber?
Yeah, I just had in your presentation, this was a complete page. But on what we got, it wasn't. So if you could, on the academic supports that we have available, and I couldn't write it down fast enough when I realized I didn't have it all.
Yes.
So if you could just send me that page, I don't even need to spend a great deal of time going over it now.
And then,
Just that's all.
and then are there any other questions? Parent?
Dr. Jenkins, just a question. I know that Mr. Sokolovic asked specifically about the alignment with the PSAT 9 with the growth as it measured for the Reading Plus. I said, is it fair to say that in order for Reading Plus to show that students were making the same amount of growth, that it had to be used according to the recommended usage per week?
Yes, recommended usage, and we are struggling a bit. Each school's a little different to get students to buy into when they're taking the assessment, to be serious about the assessment. So we've done some work from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year assessment. So some students who were, say, 3 grade levels behind at the beginning of the year, when they took the assessment in the middle of the year, there was growth. So just helping young people to understand that, because we're not normally assessing in high school. This is new. They usually sit for one assessment.
It's a problem in elementary school too.
Right, especially middle school, but just getting young people to take their reading level seriously. One thought is to match their Lexile to some of their career interests. So even if, whether you're trade or college, you definitely need to read at a superior level in order to advance in whatever pathway you choose beyond high school. So just trying to make better correlations with reading and, in career pathways.
Thank you.
Seeing that there's no questions or additional comments, thank you, Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you.
Just move down to my favorite subject, math.
Of the excitement in the room when we mentioned math.
I know me. You know me too.
Oh, I know you love.
I love math.
Brian, can we, thank you. Oh, Mr. Sokolovic loves math too.
Yes.
He does play with those numbers.
Oh, yes. Excellent.
Actually, I would have bought into becoming a math teacher now. Still,
Certification, you can probably go ahead and say it.
no, I don't need certification. Well, we don't do it actually.
There you go.
I even like in 6th grade.
Excellent. So, so our agenda today is to provide a report and to discuss the latest available assessment data and overall trends for mathematics. We will take a look at the assessments that we provide for students, such as the Acadians, which is new this year, the HMH growth measure, which we use in grades 2 through 8, the PSAT, which we're using at the end of 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade as a means of data, and also the SAT, which is used at the state level and also for our own purpose and data. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to highlight some strategies that we're utilizing in mathematics to increase the achievement and also learning in our subject area. So in math, we are, since the new standards came out in 2010, we have done a big shift from when we were learning math. When we were learning math, remember, it was more about memorizing and regurgitating facts and memorizing different procedures. And if you forgot that procedure, your math ability went. Now, because of all the new jobs and the college and career information that we have and all the research in the past 30 years, we have created a shift. And so we call that the Common Core shift. We talk about focus meaning that in the grade level bands, we're going to focus on specific topics and we're going to go really deeply on it, meaning we are not just going to focus on memorization, we're going to focus on also the understanding of the concept and also the application and problem solving. The coherence meaning specific topics that are taught in different grade levels. So if you're in 4th grade, you're going to be dealing with 1, 2, 3 skills that you're going to focus on and go very deeply on. If you're in 3rd grade, you will have these skills, and everything progresses as we go up the grades. And also last but not least, the rigor, which is what I call the pillars of math. We talk about conceptual understanding, the concept of the different things that we are learning. We talk about the procedural fluency, how fast, the old-fashioned ability of how we do things. And last but not least, the application to real life, which is problem solving. So go back one more. There you go. One more. There you go. So this is our performance index data. And I want you to look carefully. And the reason I put this first is not to start with a sore note, but to just bring awareness of where we were and where we are now. And that's important because COVID, as you notice in 2018-19, really affected mathematics as a whole, not only in Bridgeport, but also at the state level. The top bar, the blue bar, is the state. The bottom bar is the district. And so you notice in the bottom bar, the orange bar, how we were increasing, actually more than the district. If you look, more than the state, if you look at it, we were doing amazing work, and students were increasing. We're increasing on the amount of students that were hitting the target. If we look at, and I don't have it here, but if we look at growth, our growth started in 2015. Our growth started 2015, 16, our growth increased. But there was a change in what we provided for our teachers, and that was coaching. Coaching was done away in 2016 and 17. So if you look at our data, our growth data, it started decreasing in the next 3 years. And even through COVID, we'll notice a spike from 52.6% in 18-19 to now 56.6%. Thanks to first of all, having a cohesive program K-12, which we have now, and also the infusion of some coaching and some development for our teachers, not only the ones that were here, but also the ones that are coming new. As we get new teachers, we have to train them. And math is not like we used to do in the past where we memorize things. Math is more technical language. So where reading is rocket science, I think of math maybe as astrophysics, because you really have to think, and it's about logical reasoning. So it's a complex thing, and we have to learn how to teach it, and we have to learn what students should be learning. So we purchased the Acadience assessment because we wanted wanted data for K and 1. We actually, the Acadience assessment is a paper pencil assessment. It's actually more than a paper pencil assessment. It's a interview-based assessment where teachers at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year ask questions for students to do in 1 minute. In some parts, in other parts, they will point and they will have a timer 1 to 3 minutes, and then we'll ask various questions and see how the students answer those questions. This year, because it's our first year, we are focusing on basically we were doing the entire assessment, 3 modules for kindergarten and 3 modules for first grade. But our focus have been placed in 2 sections. The first one, as you see on the left, is basic quantity discrimination. Now, in English, what that means is, you have a domino with dots, and so you have to tell which of the 2 parts of the dominoes have more, and you have to tell the number. So not only do you have to know the number, but also you have to tell which quantity is larger. And so that's a multi-level skill, which involves a lot of thinking for a kindergarten student. And you notice we started the year at 29%, and we are in the middle of the year, we're up to almost 50% of the students being proficient at this skill. For the first grade, most of first grade is about computation, not only about row addition, but also understanding what addition and subtraction mean. So we, in our data, for example, we have beginning of the year, we have 26% mastery. At the end of the year, at the middle of the year, we have 31%. There's a lot of sub skills in computation that are going to carry on to second grade. In second grade, you do multi-digit addition and subtraction. In first grade, you add, up to. You also do multi-digit, but it's smaller quantities. There's also in computation, there's also regrouping and things like that. That is very difficult for a first grader. Let's see what else I have here. Our goal is to be as close to 100% as possible. And in order to help students in moving them forward, what we have done is we have implemented what we call a win block. And a win block is what I need. What I need meaning what students need. And we have each math class is an hour and a half. So 1 hour is devoted to the actual class, and then 30 minutes is devoted to that win block. During that win block, we basically use the data from the different assessments that we have, and we ensure that we are teaching students in small groups to move them along so that they could access that instruction during the other hour better. So, for example, if a student in first grade needs to count using a specific manipulative because we're going to be teaching addition, then we do that during the win block so that they're prepared to do the addition and the subtraction when we're teaching regular instruction. So we're also always teaching those pre-skills during that win block in smaller groups before we provide that access in the regular time. Another thing about the win block is we have students that achieve very highly, and those students need something for them to do. So during that win block, they will get that enrichment activities, those enrichment activities that are needed, the problem solving, and all those pieces that they need to become even more proficient than what they are. So we love the win block, and it's helping us move the data. You'll see it in the next slide. So this slide is the HMH growth measure assessment. And the HMH growth measure assessment is what we have been utilizing for the past 3 years. We started in grade 6 through 8 3 years ago. 2 years ago, we introduced 2 through 5. And then we're doing Acadians also this year. So if you look at the data for this year, you notice that there is quite a bit of growth that has happened in many grade levels, specifically grade 2 and grade 8. Grade 8 is one of those grade levels that we have been looking at it very, very, very closely. And the reason for it, first of all, we have some permanent subs in some classes, number one. But most importantly, we want students to be ready for high school. And so we've been monitoring the 8th and the 7th grade data, and we have been putting a lot of resources that we have into those grade levels so that the personnel could assist teachers in planning and in making instructional decisions. let me talk a little bit about the data itself, because this is students. What you'll see here is the percentage of students at or above level. And as you've heard me last year, we have quite a bit of students that are 2 or more grade levels below and 1 grade level below. And so, I say that things don't change very quickly. Like Rome wasn't built in one day. We have a lot of work to do below the iceberg of this data. And I just want to highlight the fact, though, a couple of points, some things that you don't see here. So if you compare the beginning location where students began, the percentage of students at the beginning of the year is higher in many of the grade levels than last year. So that is an indicator that, first of all, the year before, students receive instruction that is helping them achieve. And it's going to help us in the future as we go up the grades. That's one thing that is important to know. The other important thing to know is that in some grade levels, we have surpassed last year's performance. So I'll give you an example. In grade 2, for example, last year, the performance was at 17%. And this year, we're up in, 23.9? Grade 3 is 15% last year. Grade 4, 11.5 last year. Grade 5, 12. Grade 6, 14%, and grade 7, 15. The only grade that remained very consistent from last year was 8th grade. And last year, 8th grade was at 25.8. And this year, we are at 25.7. So a slight decrease, but still right around the same numbers. And if you think about it, the amount of skills in 8th grade is very significant. So I'm actually happy that we have that amount of students achieving at those grade levels. I'm very, very, looking at our future for ensuring that many more students, I'm hoping that by the time I retire, we could have these bars looking at 75, 80, 90, 100%. So as I mentioned, the strategies that we utilized for this was the utilization, implementation of a win block. We also have coaching that was provided to 14 schools. And that coaching has been incredible for these 14 schools. These 14 schools were chosen because of their performance during last year's SBAC assessment. So we decided to choose the ones that did not perform as well as others. And we provided some meaningful coaching through HMH. We bought HMH coaching to support those schools. So what we have seen through the coaches, we compared the schools that had coaching with the schools that have not had coaching. And what we noticed is the students at the lower tier were most affected by that coaching, where the growth was greater in the coach schools versus the non-coach schools. And I'll talk a little bit about that during the next slide. So this slide, this is our bell curve that shows where students landed in the different tiers that they landed by color. It's hard to see it from here. So I'll help you a little bit there. The red is more than 2 grade levels below. The orange is between 2 and 1 grade level below. The yellow is right around 1 grade level below. And then we want students to be in the green and the blue. So what we notice in looking at the realm of how students are performing is that you see the minus numbers, that students are moving, we are moving students, our teachers are moving students from the red and the orange right into the better part of the spectrum, and in quite a bit of numbers. I'll give you some examples. We had 38% of students in grades K-8, more than 2 grade levels below. That is That is 3,273 students. And during the middle, this decreased by 9 percentage points to 2,477 students. That's almost 800 students that we managed to move from one area to the other, which is truly not easy. Truly not easy, but thanks to all the different things that we're doing through the WIN block, through looking at data, we've managed to support those students in that form. We have a lot of work to do still, but we are looking that we're moving in the right direction. In addition, 29%, that's 2,480 students, were between 1 and 2 grade levels below, and now 24%, 2,048 students are in that category. So that decreased by 5%. They move into less than 1 year and plus. So everybody's moving in that right direction. And if you compare that to last year, what you'll notice is that students are moving. Students were moving, but less students were moving into the blue and the red category last year than this year, which to me means that the teachers understand the program better. Teachers are using strategies that are helping their students move, and students are learning the content. If we take a look at grade 11 SAT, last year's SAT, this is a comparison of last year's SAT with this year's SAT. Last year, March 2022 with this year, 2023. We had, and I want to just ensure that there's an understanding that the makeups for this assessment were just done. So this data is unfinished. This is like hot off the press, and it may change depending on how many students took the test on Monday and Tuesday. Today, Monday, 25th and 26th were the makeups. So this might change. We had an increase in the amount of students taking the assessment from 967 to 1,036. And again, that might increase because of the amount of makeups that we have done so far. There was a small drop on the percentage of students meeting benchmark from 10% to 9%. There was an increase in from 3% to 2% on the strengthen. Unfortunately, we had also an increase in the amount of students actually approaching increase, and the strengthen went from 88 to 89. Now, mind you, these are different cohort of students. Yeah. We have to be careful with that. And that's why I provided the next slide, because the next slide is more telling about where the instruction is going and where, what students really, where students really are. Unfortunately, our average score, went down from 407 to 398. And again, that might change depending on how the students produce now in the assessment. So what I did was I took, and I'm going to use some terminology, non-matched pair data. And what that means is I just went into the SAT website, and I pulled data from the PSAT from all the schools for 2021, 2022 for PSAT in 10th grade, and 2023 for all the schools in 11th grade. And that's what you have here. This might mean that there are students that came from outside the district that are here and might have some doing on this data. And it also, so it's not a match pair. That's what match pair means, that these are the students that took the test from the beginning to the end. These are non-match pairs, okay? I want that to be clear. And what you notice is that there is an increase, an increase in the average scale score for those students. Unfortunately, I didn't have all the data for last year's cohort due to the fact that we didn't take the test in some grade levels, so I wasn't able to produce this. But if you look at the next slide, next slide, you will see the same cohort data divided by schools, and so it's very telling on on different schools and different makeup of schools. First of all, if you look at the cohort, the highest is Fairchild Wheeler, followed by Central High School. And you'll notice that those increases in different ways. And, you know, I looked at the amount of math that Fairchild Wheeler does throughout, not only in the amount of students the amount of math that students take, but also how math is included in many of the different content areas in IT, as well as Aero. There's a lot of math involved. So kids are doing math all the time. And I think that attributes, that's just my opinion, attributes to that type of achievement. We still have a lot of work to do. The target for 11th grade is 510 points. It's actually the highest out of all the areas. And so we have a ton of work. Another thing that I noticed about Fairchild and Central is that they use Khan Academy. They utilize Khan Academy with more fidelity than all the other schools. So we're working with the other schools to ensure that they're going to be using that resource, because Khan Academy is going to help students in practicing the skills that they need for the SAT. So we're going to be monitoring that very, very, very closely. We're also looking at the semester schedule. And one of the things that we did some time ago was that we changed from a year-long schedule for all the classes to a semester-based schedule. And in classes like algebra, geometry, algebra 2, that students might need more time to break down those concepts and skills, it might be more beneficial to have a longer year, a year-long math class than a semester base. The advantage of a semester base is you have opportunities for more credits. So you could take many more classes. So if you didn't do too well in one class, you could definitely take, another class or the same class again, or you could take it in the summer. So there's more opportunities to retake classes. While in a year-long schedule is a little more difficult, but it could be done the same way. We're looking at this very closely because we see that there's a need to ensure that students have ample time to develop those skills throughout, especially in mathematics. And I think we even spoke about it in reading. Wrong, I don't see. Am I correct? So we looked at it for various areas. I'm going to speak about math then. So the strategies for improvement, I like to break them down into four basic areas. And I'm not going to read them for you. I have 2 pages of it, but basically there are 4 different areas. The first area that we're looking at is a cohesive tier 1 instruction. And that's done in 2 ways. The first way is through professional development, providing professional development not only for teachers, but also administrators to support them in their endeavor for administrators to look at, opportunities to help teachers in their endeavor of teaching, and for teachers to obviously be able to teach the content correctly and produce good results. We'd love to. We're engaging in walkthroughs to gather data and help in providing that support for the administrators. We're going to focus on. We want teachers to really focus on the 3 pillars of the Common Core, and I mentioned them before. Conceptual understanding, problem solving, and computational fluency, and ensuring that there's a balanced instruction model throughout the year with all students. Number 2, we talked about teacher support. So we have the lead teachers again next year. We're happy about that. And we also have easy teachers with support K3. So fully utilizing these staff to support and provide information both ways, 2-way information, both from the school to the district and from the district to the school via our meetings, via workshops for teachers, and even through visitations. We have done great work with lead teachers this year in training. We love the opportunity, the fact that next year lead teachers will be separated into math, solely for math and solely for science, rather than having science and math, because that gives us an opportunity to provide more professional development for those teachers to help their teachers more. We're looking also in acceleration through our WIN block. We want to ensure that that teachers are using that time to produce results. And that involves visiting, that involves talking to principals and ensuring that we're looking at those features. We're looking at ensuring that during that time, the teacher has a small group and that students are using the computer in another group, computer-based resources. And then in the third group, that there is some type of activity that is going to help them either problem solve or to build a computation. It could be a game, it could be a problem solving activity, etc. We want to ensure that everyone is looking at data through at the school level, at the grade level, and at the district level. And not only just looking at data for looking at data, but doing exactly what we're doing here, which is, okay, what's next? So what? What's next? So we're using this to inform instruction, and we're using this to inform next steps. And I know Dr. Jenkins spoke about MTSS, and I think that's an important process because it's going to help in really looking at what are the cohort of students that really need to move and what things we have to do to move them, as well as what strategies and what goals we have to put in place to make that happen. Last things, we're looking at the learning platforms, and in the learning platforms, utilizing and using the data from the learning platform, utilizing Khan Academy and MobyMax with daily and really tracking that, and also training teachers on how to utilize that data, utilizing the data from the growth measure assessments, as well as the data from the common finals that we have developed. The common finals is the first year, actually, we're going to do common finals in 4 courses, because we want to see how students are doing at the end of those common finals and how different schools are producing those results for their students. We actually sent out those common finals at the beginning of the semester so that we wanted teachers to know what content was going to be tested. There are no surprises. This is what's coming. That could be a two-edged, double-edged sword, but we wanted to ensure that they knew. And last but not least, and most importantly, we want to do things with parents. We want to ensure that all the schools are having math nights and that they're doing workshops to help parents in helping them move forward the strategies that are going to help that they could do at home to help their children. I love to do math nights with games because that helps with the computational fluency and the thinking. Parents love, all the different activities that we bring forth. And also we have resources in HMH that help parents in understanding some of the strategies that we have in our program, including videos. We have some nice videos that parents could actually access via when students log on to their book, they could have access to those videos that are going to help the parent and are going to help the kid by providing examples on how to do the different things in mathematics, how to perform the different concepts in math. So in a nutshell, this is our data, and these are improvement strategies, or strategies for improvement, I should say, that we are utilizing, and we're going to continue to enhance with the coming school year also.
Okay. I'll open the floor up first for committee members and then to board members. So Mr. Traber.
No, I have no questions. Exciting to hear.
Mr. Sakalovic?
Yeah, same question about the academic supports, COVID funding.
Well, we have, as you know, we have one more year of ESSER funding, and we're taking it 1 year at a time. That's more Marlene question, to be honest with you, because I'm training as many teachers as possible to be proficient in mathematics and in these strategies. We're creating everything we do. We're storing somewhere. So we want to make sure that if something disappears, that there is a plan B for enacting whatever it is that we have to do. Because after all, we're going to get new teachers, and they have to be trained. I'm hopeful that with your help and with all the different things that you guys are doing at the state and local level and pushing those that are making decisions, and with the parent support, we can continue and get more funding. But that is a very difficult road.
And as far as just lost track. Could you come back to me? I had another question, but I forgot what it was.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Jelen?
No questions from me.
Go to myself. Again, I love seeing the growth. I understand the importance of the growth, especially seeing my laptop died, so but it was the assessment data going through all the grades from 2nd grade to 8th grade, and just seeing from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year that growth. And I think it's been a dead horse. Like, we know it's COVID funding. We have coaches. We have the ability to pay our teachers for that extra time to be teacher mentors. We're seeing the return on our investment. And so, yes, it will be very scary not to continue to invest and move forward. Because we're seeing it. Mr. Traber?
Yeah, I would just go one step further, though. The COVID funding has allowed us to return to a level we were at before. It has not allowed us to go beyond that level to the level enjoyed in the wealthier communities in our neighborhood. And we are fighting to get the same resources so that we can provide our students the same level of opportunity to learn, as I think was said earlier, that are enjoyed in the communities that we are right next to. And so we want to maintain this level of funding and this positive direction that we've been able to reestablish with the help of the COVID funding. But we also need to get additional resources to really continue to build on these programs to maximize the potential for our students to grow.
I do have another question this time. What % of students took the makeup SAT?
I don't have that answer. I was sure you're going to ask me that question. I really don't know. That answer, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just put it as an update for the next meeting.
Yeah, I will bring that back.
I remember my question.
Mrs. Colvin?
Yes, as far as the final exam, the universal final exam, you said you gave out the exam that is double-edged sword. Is that having like every question on the final exam, or just subject matters and types of questions?
No, we gave the actual final. Many of the schools are using project-based exams currently.
Mm.
So we just added the extra, just a plain exam to kind of gather that data. But we provided the actual exam to all the teachers. The final exam will be provided via Edulastic, so will be a computer-based exam, not a paper pencil copy.
Okay. So, trying to say this without casting any aspersions.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
What's to prevent teachers from teaching to the exact test?
Yeah, and I nothing. I mean, teachers could actually do that, and that's why I mentioned it's a double-edged sword, because teachers could do that. It is the first time that we do the assessment, And the first time you always have, different roadblocks. So we want to keep it open. Obviously, the assessment is going to change a little bit as we gather more data. But you're correct. I mean, that's something that we, that could happen.
Would it be possible to put like representative questions, like you got X plus Y equals 10,
Yeah.
say that's going to be covered, question like that, and then change it to X plus 3 equals 10 or something like that. So there's something a little different. So
When you do something like this at the district level is not an easy thing, because there are a lot of players that, that have done tests for many years. And so it become a union issue. So you have to ensure that every voice is collected. So part of the reason why we wanted to send out the exam was because we want to make sure that everyone knew that their voice was heard. And so we haven't had an issue because of that, because we've been very open on what we have. But you're right. I think, for the next round, I think it will be, as we change and modify different questions of the test, people already will know what's coming on the test, so we will not have to send the actual exam out.
makes sense. Thank you.
I just have a comment on the same token. It's not like we're incentivizing teachers that if you get X amount of kids to pass the test, you're going to get a bonus.
Right.
So it's more of just transparency to the teachers of what's going to be on the test, and nothing's necessarily right. And it's not do or die for our students with that particular exam.
And I just want to be clear, the purpose of the assessment is to provide data for the teacher.
Mhm.
So it's to say, these are some competencies that we feel that are important for everyone to have. And so you have to teach that throughout the year. We're going to assess it at the end of the year and give you that data so that you could in turn, first of all, look at all the questions and see which questions most students bombed out. And so when you're teaching that again, you will pay very close attention to those questions. You also could gather data across years. So if you see a kid that didn't do too well in this final, but they did well in your class, you will take a look at that child and for the next year and see what things you could do during SRBI or MTSS, during that intervention times to help that student move forward. And then the third thing is now you have data on mathematics and other source of data in math.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Now you've been acknowledged.
Sorry.
Thank
Sorry.
Yeah, to follow up on that, does the data actually follow the child? For instance, like from his third grade, if a child was weak on, say, the upper level of multiplication tables, will his fourth grade teacher know that in the beginning of the year as something that needs to be worked on, and follow that through from grade 6, K to 5 school, something go to 6, 7, and 8. Does that track as well from school to school?
That's an amazing question. So the principal of the building has access to previous data, and they could provide that to teachers if that's something that is done. In terms of the teacher themselves, they do a pre-test at the beginning of the year, and you saw the beginning of the year assessment, which assesses the actual grade level. And it gives some data regarding content standards, like you're in K4, you have 4 areas. If you're in 5 to 8, you have 5 areas. So those areas, you receive some information about where students are at right at the beginning of the year.
Thank you.
No further questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome. See you, Miss Christine.
For science. Mr. Henry.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
We wait for Mr. Skovic.
He's not a committee member, so we can proceed.
I do want to start by thanking everyone for putting science on the agenda and having science in mind. This is good. I appreciate everyone's time here this evening. And thank you, Mr. Pecora. I also have an incorrect date. I had yesterday on there for some reason, so I apologize for that. But my name is Dave Henry. I am the Science and Aquaculture Director here in Bridgeport Public Schools.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we want Ms. Scott to sit up here too?
Absolutely.
Can we make room for Ms. Scott?
I think we can.
Yeah.
Happy to have her.
Who's down here?
Yeah.
And if Ms. Baptiste Perez, you scoot to the left, get them both together.
You gonna do like the kids? I didn't mean to take your chair.
That's perfectly fine. It just brings me one step closer to the snacks.
So this is Portia Scott-Chom. She is the Assistant Science Director. So very happy to have her aboard this year. We've done a lot of good work. I'd like to in our time together. So I want to share a little bit about science assessment. I do have the slides on my phone here, so I'm not checking any other messages or being distracted. And share some of the data and then really focus on what we're doing to improve science here in Bridgeport Public Schools. So the state of Connecticut does require that we assess our students in science in 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. And those assessments are based on the Next Generation Science Standards, abbreviated as NGSS. And so the NGSS standards have been adopted by most of the states in the country, including Connecticut. And it revolves around a three-dimensional approach, the three dimensions being the disciplinary core ideas, or the DCIs, the science and engineering practices, or SEPs, and then the cross-cutting concepts and the CCCs, as we abbreviate them. So a lot of abbreviations. Thankfully, our science teachers are fully versed with it, which is great. And we're bringing any of those that aren't up to speed as best we can. So just this week and ongoing are our assessments in science. So that data is being generated as the students are taking the test as we speak. And because it is a new standardized assessment, there is minimal historical data to go by. And then, the last piece there, the COVID losses, as we've seen in other subject matters and areas, are going to be evident as they are across the state in science. Thank you, Ms. Pecora. So just a brief overview of the Next Generation Science Standards. So the three dimensions that I mentioned are all intertwined. And so the approach of teaching science through the NGSS method is that it's not a matter of just learning facts, similar to what my colleague, Mr. Planis, mentioned. There's more of a hands-on approach, let's do science rather than just learn facts about science approach. And so that can be a bit of a change pedagogically for some of our teachers. But again, we've thankfully with Ms. Portia Scott-Chom have worked with those teachers, with some of our lead teachers, to really bring everyone up to speed and do the best we can by our students. Thank you. All right. So just a good kind of visual for the three dimensions of NGSS. You really can't do one without the other two. And so the whole idea is that these three are intertwined, and really try to show students the connections across different science areas. And then science doesn't exist in just a biology classroom in one space and a chemistry classroom in another, but there are a lot of these cross-cutting concepts that do, in fact, kind of hit all of the different disciplines. So a brief overview again of those three different dimensions of NGSS. A little blurry for us to see here, but one of the science and engineering practices is the here
asking questions,
asking questions, and just the analysis of data, the analysis and interpreting of data. And so that's a skill that we work with students from K through 12 on. And that is, it's a practice we expect to see in our classrooms. And obviously, it's going to look a lot different as the student progresses in age and matriculates through the school system. So, but nonetheless, we still share methods, and we've got good resources to help our teachers with the ability to, help kindergarten students, again, all the way through 12th grade students with the analyzation and interpretation of data. So we go to the results. We can look at the next slide. Thank you. And we see COVID loss. So these are, again, it's tough. This is a graphic from our state data website, but that is the lowest or the most recent results. So you can see an increase in kind of the red and yellow bands. That's a COVID loss. We have gained a little bit of that back, as you can see visually, but really nice to hear, and I've heard in other meetings from our colleagues regarding math and ELA gains, especially at the younger grades, like you had mentioned, Ms. Baptiste Perez, the return on investment from those, programs and interventions at the very early ages are what we're really hoping to leverage with the product we've got starting next year in the K K5 grade band to increase these, the performance of our students and really increase the overall science experience that they have. So we do have support systems that we've put in place. Again, the biggest one is sitting to my left right here in Miss Portia Scott-Chom. And so she's been heavy with the K-8 focus this year, but helping kind of across the board as well. And again, I direct the aquaculture program, which does tie up a lot of my time. And when I'm not there, I do try to visit the other high schools. With the number of schools that we have in the district, it's great to have other boots on the ground, even with long-term subs or other people in some of those science teaching positions. It's been a great support system and person really to have in place. So I appreciate you. And again, that work has spilled out. There's multiple classroom visits. At one point, it was an average of one per day that she was getting into across the district, which is great. The other big piece is this discovery education. So again, I'm excited for the platform to share a little bit about that. I appreciate the Board of Education's approval of that purchase and those funds. The money's already been allocated and is not ESSER tied, so we've expended those dollars. And we expended those dollars in a way that we've got an 8-year kind of total package that's getting phased in over a couple of years as we end contracts with previous products. So we're preparing for the K-5 rollout for next school year. Again, seeing the reading gains that they're making, some of the math gains they're making, really hoping to bring those to the science education. And again, with the product that we've got in discovery education, namely the science tech book, it shows very clear connections to ELA and to math as you teach science. We've got print and kits that have been ordered and already paid for all of our learners in the K-5. I'm working with Discovery Education now to coordinate that delivery to all of our buildings. They've got all the specifics on all the intricacies of all the multiple buildings throughout Bridgeport Public Schools. So we're excited for the rollout and delivery of that. And go to the next one. So we have lead teachers in each building. And so we actually met yesterday with these lead teachers over at Aqua. We have a great group that kind of span the K-12 grade range and really focused on the K-5 folk and let them know that as science lead teachers with a new curriculum resource and discovery education, they're going to be the boots on the ground in the building on the day-to-day to answer questions regarding science education for our youngest. So another thought I had is we often get just basic questions, especially from new teachers or teachers who are not necessarily comfortable with science of what do I need to teach, when do I need to teach it, and how am I going to teach it? And so as we'll see in further slides, Ms. Portia Scott-Chom has put a scope and sequence in place for our K-5 learners. So the answer's right there in resources that are provided, both hard copy and digital, to our teachers. And they have, again, the discovery education resource will be activated as of July 1. We started some training with our lead teachers in that yesterday to hopefully make for a smooth transition into that new product. Another piece that we've worked on from the high school lens is the 9th grade general science course. That has been, the curriculum has been revised in that thanks to some wonderful teachers. And again, I'm remiss if I don't thank all of our wonderful science teachers in Bridgeport Public Schools. I know you guys work hard every day and I appreciate it. And some of them do, again, go above and beyond just what they do in the classroom, including some folks that worked on that 9th grade curriculum revision. So we've got a general science class that kind of hits a lot of the NGSS standards that we traditionally have been weak in that 9th grade class. And that has also been aligned to our discovery education resource, which has been on and activated for our high school level this year. So some other professional development sessions that we've provided. And again, big thanks to Ms. Scott-Chom for taking the lead on many of these. The titles are there. We've gotten great feedback from our teachers as to what they thought was best in line and most helpful for them in the classroom. And on the other end of the spectrum. So again, appreciate the feedback that we get from them. We try to work as a cohesive group to make sure that we're doing the best that we can, again, for all kids in Bridgeport Public Schools regarding their science education. So beyond just those professional development, we've got We've had many other sessions. Again, we've talked about, you can go to the next one, Mr. Cora, thank you. Formative and summative assessments, really encouraging student choice within a science classroom. So if you're going to display your knowledge of a certain science topic, we encourage teachers to let the students choose what that's going to look like and the media in which they're going to present. Again, collaborating with colleagues gets teachers love the opportunity to do that. We purposely construct time for them to be able to do that when we have our professional development sessions. And then just sharing, again, task design templates and looking at kind of test questions and kind of digging into some of the data there to see where our students are struggling and what we can really help them to be able to be successful. I'll let you take this one if you don't mind, Ms. Scotch. I'm going to grab a drink of water.
I'm sorry, I can't see it. But yeah, my job is basically to facilitate a professional learning community. And our philosophy within the science department, we understand that our teachers are on the front line. They're the ones who are actually a very important part of, student progress and understanding the information that is being given them. So it's really important, at least that's been my mission as an assistant science director, to ensure that my teachers have all of the things that they need to be effective in the classroom. So I've developed a scope and sequence for K-8 that dealt with the curriculum that's in place right now, because 6th to 8th grade curriculum is going to stay the same next year. But they've also, the K-5 teachers have had professional development regarding the new curriculum, and they've been given a scope and sequence for next year that is, as Mr. Henry mentioned, digital, and I give a hard copy. And I also serve as like a point person whenever they have any questions regarding IT, curriculum, or pedagogy. And I like to go into the classroom so I can see what are some of the challenges the teachers have. And I think, our teachers, they'll tell us what it is that they need to be effective. So for me, it's really important to hear from them how we can help them aside from just the materials. Some of the things that we have made sure that our teachers understand that are non-negotiables are that, one, the kids should have hands-on experiences. Looking at that 3-dimension, that DCI is what traditionally our kids have been taught, which is the content. You're learning through either the lecture or through reading. That paradigm has changed. Now they're learning by the doing. So looking at the science and engineering practices is what scientists do. How are you engaging as a scientist? So that's what we're having our teachers do with our kids. And looking at cross-cutting concepts, they're able to see the interrelatedness of each one of these core concepts. So my job is to just ensure that they're getting the information to help them help our kids. But there's, again, non-negotiables. They have to do hands-on. They have to make sure their lesson plans are NGSS aligned, which they are because our programs come NGSS aligned. And, we try to look at, and I've been saying it for some time, having our professionals collaborate, like working with the interventionists and working with the special education teachers, how they should be collaborating to helping those kids who are, and even the bilingual teachers, helping students who are multilingual learners and those who have IEPs. So we're organizing on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah. I think the next slide shows another one. We work with our HR department about cross endorsements. We've got teachers within the district that are not endorsed in science, that do have a science interest and want to learn more about it and get prepared to teach it in the classroom. And so we prepared multiple PDs for that group. We have some current successful Bridgeport Public School science teachers that help us present some of those sessions to really share what it's like to teach science within our classrooms. And that is, again, going to lead to hopefully a stronger science knowledge base amongst our teachers And again, that kind of spans grade levels. We've had, again, a lot of help from Portia regarding the district science fair, collaborating with judges and just the logistics of kind of running that. We've got a lot of good feedback from that regarding, again, the judging and the progression from there onto the state science fair, which was great. And then we've partnered with the STEM ecosystem, which is a great organization locally that is really trying to bring all these different STEM ideaed corporations and organizations together and provide sort of a portal for all of those activities to be shared on and really not overstep and have multiple events kind of overlapping on the same day, but to share sort of in a greater Bridgeport STEM ecosystem. So that's kind of ongoing work that we're doing. So just to go back to Discovery Education, when we think about, our most in-need learners, students with special needs, students who are multi-language learners, one of the reasons Discovery Education was a big winner amongst our curriculum revision process was because of the supports that are in place for those learners. So there's a translated slide on the left, I believe. And so these are, they're all kind of coded within our web browsers to be easily translated to any of the languages that a web browser will translate them into. And then within the program itself, it's got English and Spanish, and both, I believe, at varying reading levels. So if you click to the next slide, this one shows this is a biology lesson that's been translated into Haitian Creole, which I know we have a population of students here that's their native language. So that's another one, there's another example of those. And then again, for our special needs, there's a second, a lower reading level, so as to take text that is at a higher reading level and make it more accessible to students. Then beyond there, there's a speech to text capability. So students that may have difficulties reading, they can have it read to them simply by highlighting and clicking an embedded button within there. So we have had some nice indicators of success this year. And I don't know, one of those, again, a great feedback we've gotten from our Discovery Education folk at the high school level. One hard piece of data that I looked at the other day, and I looked at it today, and it's increased from that number, but over 100,000 different resources have been accessed just this school year through Discovery Education. So I'm excited to see kind of how that trickles down to the K-5 level. And the ability to break that data down at a building level will lead to some really productive conversations between our science teachers, science leaders, and then even those science leaders as well as our building principals. Again, the NGSS results, they're taking it this week. But again, I've got faith in the gains that we've seen in our ELA and math, that they will kind of trickle into our science results as well as with what we've put in place. And again, the Discovery Education coming into play next year. I haven't mentioned it's a 6-year agreement at each grade band. So the high school started this year as year 1 of 6. Next year, K-5 will be 1 of 6. And then the following, it'll be 6-8 as year 1 of 6. So I've shared with the teachers that this is not going anywhere. It's not a pilot. This is how we're going to be teaching science to our Bridgeport Public School students. Another big piece of our curriculum revision and the committee therein was looking at consistency. We know we've got a transient population, not just of students, but even of teachers, administrators. And so as people move and positions change, to have some consistency for our kids is really what we strive to do. And so we're excited that in 2 years, every student learning science in Bridgeport Public Schools will have the same class link embedded icon to click on that's going to take them to their familiar landing place of Discovery Education Science Textbook. So we're excited about that. I have to give a public shout out to Miss Kelsey Ketto and Bernadette Kudaisi, both of High Horizons, who finished first place in the state in their category. No one beat them in the category. I believe it was life science for partners, but wonderful job by them. They were also winners of our city science fair. They've been duly awarded. There's more awards coming, but wonderful news from them. Also got a really nice note from the chairman of the board of the science fair in relation to us. I said, we're trying to make strides in the right direction. She said, you most certainly are. And again, we had about $3,000 of winnings from that state science fair awarded to 21 different students, or pardon me, 21 different projects. I think the total is 28 different students with some pairs in there. for our Bridgeport Public School students. So nice to see, again, those kind of indicators of success this year. And then again, looking ahead, we're excited for next year. We've already started planning the PD with Discovery. We met with those lead teachers yesterday. We gave them a sneak preview and tutorial about what is coming. The 6-8, we're going to do a similar thing in a year. We've already got correspondence today from Discovery that access will be open for central office folk for all of next school year. So we'll be able to go in and plan and take some, screenshots and see sort of how what the differences are there from the other grade bands. So we're excited about that. We are in conversations and potential grant agreements with a couple local universities with the idea of developing a pipeline for Bridgeport Public School students to become science teachers within our schools. And so this really excites me, especially for the prospects of our students that are really science driven. It would afford them a nearly free, if not 100% free opportunity to go through an undergraduate program, even with a master's or at least a certification in teaching, and then with an agreement that they'd be coming back to Bridgeport Public Schools to work within our school system and give back. Even during their time as an undergraduate, they plan on bringing them back to our schools to kind of share and kind of build that pipeline. So we're excited about the prospects of that. Again, just bringing the K-12 kind of learning platform, the consistency therein, the NGSS alignment that is strong throughout that product, bringing that to all of our schools. Again, not as a pilot, not as in one pocket or another, but across the entirety of the district is really what we're excited about with Discovery. And then, as I think I've hit on, you can't do science if you can't read, write, and do mathematics and do all the other things. So it's not taught in isolation. It does involve all the academic skills. We highlight where those cross, curricular areas for highlighting are for our teachers, and give those opportunities to our students to be able to see that yes, the math and English skills do come into play not only in science but in all of their other classrooms. And again, we're excited about the data. Again, the youngest of our kids are the ones that are, they're right there. They're the most curious from a science lens, which I, always try to impress upon our K-5 teachers that don't, embrace that curiosity, let them ask questions. It's one of our science and engineering practices, and get them, excited about asking those questions about the world around them. And then that excitement we can just foster again throughout their years in Bridgeport Public Schools, and then feed them into some of the wonderful kind of high school programs and opportunities that we have, including the aquaculture school. So with that, I will conclude. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. Again, I'll open up the floor to committee members and then the rest of the board. Mr. Traber?
I don't have a question. I want to compliment you on one of the smartest moves you could make would be to hire Miss Scott, one of my daughter's favorite teachers growing up.
Thank you.
Delighted to see her in this capacity.
You and me both, sir.
Mr. Sokolovic?
Yeah, a couple of things. A number of years back, I've discussed this before, and I bring it up every day. As you walk it through the K-5 classrooms, are we noticing more science decor? And
Are we noticing more?
science decor? Because when I did my initial, because we know we grab the kids' attention when they're young.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk through the majority of the classrooms in the past, I don't know if it's changed recently or not, you would see poetry, history, a couple of math charts. Maybe if you had a K-5 teacher with a science degree, you would see some in their classrooms, but science was always underrepresented as the core item in the
Driving question board should be up. We've got word walls. We've got other places, models that students are making, big push in NGSS. And so we actually asked almost that exact question to our lead teachers yesterday. And there were nods of yes, we're seeing, and so we're getting there. Again, this was a little tough year with K-5 because of the fact that next year we're starting this program. So, but again, we're excited for that rollout. We've got our K-5 lead teachers kind of already accessed and rostered with that program. So, and again, even we got feedback from them yesterday regarding what we've done, and there's sense of excitement about those lead teachers saying, yeah, we thank you for kind of sharing that tutorial. Again, they're thankful we've got teacher editions and print kits and all of that already ordered on, that's all set. So I don't know, I'll defer to you, but I get a sense of excitement from them regarding, where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, 92% success rate in terms of how they felt positively about what they were learning during PDs. But a lot of teachers are still a little bit, hesitant because they feel that they have to be the expert with teaching science. And we're trying to explain to them, one, there's an answer key, and two, if you do the process with the children, you're going to understand, you're going to see the patterns. So you're going to be more relaxed with teaching science. So they're there, they want to learn, but there's still some people that are a little hesitant, but we're walking them through that. We're holding their hands through that.
And beyond just the answer key, Discovery Education shows there you can toggle between the teacher view and the student view.
Yes.
So the student view is what a student would see, but the teacher view shows prompting questions, what answers you should be getting from the students, what questions to ask them if they give this answer. That's a common misconception. So a lot of those supports are embedded right there within Discovery Education. And again, beginning in our pre-service days before we get the classrooms open in the fall, they're going to have exposure to that. We've got lead teachers that have already had some exposure to that. So trying as best we can to put all of those supports in place so that when we do open our doors in the fall, it's not the learning, a lot of the learning curve has been taken care of and teachers have what they need. They've got some exposure to it. Again, they will learn throughout the year, but they won't feel as though they're unprepared.
And as far as the NGSS, does the state have any rationale why they only have it at certain grade levels?
At 5, 8, and 11,
That's a good question.
not that I'm aware of.
Because I would imagine that makes it harder to gather useful data between the points.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is a challenge for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jelen?
No questions from me. Thank you. A great presentation.
Sir?
I don't have any questions. Looking forward to the rollout to the lower grades. Excited to just some of the growth that was in that earlier chart. I think that was throughout the years. I could barely see, but it's good to see that we've invested in a system that long term doesn't matter if you switch to school. It doesn't matter if you move to a different side of the neighborhood. That consistency with the format, that's going to be, I think, a very big impact. And I'm excited to see it roll out in next year's presentation because we'll have more data and we'll have more feedback and we'll have more science awards. So
Yes.
thank you for your time. Double check. Anyone else? Check. Thank you both.
All right, thank you.
The next item is the special education update. Thank you. All my technology is dying on my end.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Dr. Karen Baldwin. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Schools, and in my role as Deputy Superintendent, I have the privilege of supervising and working with the Department of Specialized Instruction and Related Service in the district. And so as such, I have a great partner with Ms. Johnson as the Director of Specialized Instruction. And so tonight we're here to provide the committee with an update regarding special education. Specifically, there was questions regarding sort of the structure of the department and the makeup of the department. Questions regarding enrollment of students, how many students are identified as having needing services under IDEA. Also questions about the number of children we might be servicing in charter schools or we have determined need and out-of-district placement. So we'll go through that tonight, as well as give you information from the audit that the Board of Education approved in the fall of 2022 that was conducted by Arizona State University and the Urban Collaborative. And so they have finalized that report, and it was shared just last week with the district administrators. So we're moving forward with that work. So that's.
Excuse me, there's someone, please put yourself
You
on.
mute your,
Brian Pecora.
oops.
Oh, I need my glasses.
Oh, to get the style.
Sorry.
Motion for 5-minute recess while our IT gets everything in order. Oh,
Oh, I'm happy to get done.
oh, you don't need to go through with that vote. It looks like everything's in order now. Awesome.
Thank you. So we're actually on the correct slide. We did want to advance the slide, so that worked out well. I wanted to turn it over to Ms. Johnson, who joined the district in October. And we meet weekly to address our ongoing continuous improvement efforts. And so she'll talk about the structure of the department and supervision.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin with talking a little bit about the department structure and supervision. The department is comprised of the following: a director of specialized instruction, 8 supervisors of specialized instruction. I want to pause there for a minute because it's important to share that our supervisors are assigned a variety of schools, with the exception of 2 supervisors, one being primarily responsible for SCANE and all things preschool and supporting early childhood programs across the city, and the other supervisor being primarily responsible for the Bridgeport Learning Center. We have 1 supervisor that is also responsible for supporting our out-of-district placements and charters, and the remaining supervisors support all of our schools across the district. In addition to our supervisors of specialized instruction, we have a parent ombudsperson, a behaviorist. Our behaviorist is really supportive in providing strategies to support students that may be in crisis or exemplifying challenges. That individual is able to provide on-site supports and guidance to teachers, and just to be another instrumental part of the team. In addition to our behaviorists, we have an administrative assistant, 2 program support partners who've been very instrumental in providing supports as it relates to CT SEDS, data management, transportation needs across the district, and ESY, to name a few. In addition to the special education personnel that I have just mentioned, we work very closely with our related service personnel. There's a director of psychology, speech, language, hearing, and OT, and social work. All of our related services work directly under those individuals, but together we work very closely to support the needs of our students across the district. Next slide. When we think about caseloads, because I know this is one thing that was of importance, typically we have case managers assigned to a variety of students. They manage the caseloads, and that simply means ensuring that our IEPs are compliant, that the students that are assigned to them, we have someone progress monitoring, closely looking at their performance, pivoting where necessary if we find that a student is having some difficulty and we need to come back together collectively to take a closer look in addressing the needs, being the liaison between the school and families, and really being the nucleus and collaborating with teachers and support staff that all support that particular student. Our average caseloads for special education teachers typically ranges from 12 to 15. However, there are teachers with 20 or more. It's important to understand that right now in our district, that really also is also determined by what your role is as a special education teacher. If you are a teacher of one of our self-contained programs, your caseload may look very different than a teacher that is primarily serving as a resource teacher, or a teacher that is at the secondary level, focusing on a concentrated area to multiple students across the various periods throughout the day. In terms of our numbers, overall, right now, we have 3,818 students with IEPs. That number goes up and down. As students demonstrate success, there are opportunities for them to be exited from special education services and fully included in the general education setting. This is a very transient community. We have students that come and go all of the time. That can impact the number. And sometimes after we've exhausted interventions and found that students continue to exhibit difficulties and challenges, it will prompt the referral process to special education, which is why this number tends to fluctuate. Of that 3,818 students, 334 of those students are out of district. We are responsible for making sure that we keep our eyes on each of these students. We are responsible for facilitating the PPTs and ensuring that their needs are met, even though they are not here on site. In addition to 432 students with IEPs in our charter schools across the district. We are responsible for facilitating those meetings, being thought partners, and providing support to the charter schools in the very same way we would with our elementary and high schools here on site. In terms of compliance status with state requirements, I am very happy to say we are very close to coming to a conclusion with the corrective actions that were imposed upon the district. We are still responding to the 21-22 indicator 13, which is secondary transitions. We have I think our final professional development that would be provided to all administrators and teachers and facilitated by a member of the State Department of Education on June 8th. And that is to ensure that we are following that process, including our students in that process at that stage, and developing goals and objectives that are appropriate and preparing them for later in life. In addition to that, we have one final action step to resolve the independent educational evaluations concern that came up some time ago. We have our final, we have a parent meeting that we will be presenting to families on May 17th. We have presenters that will be walking parents through just overall special education and what their rights are when it comes to educational evaluations. And that will bring us to a closure in terms of being responsive to those corrective actions. And last but not least, we continue to really narrow down the hours owed in terms of compensatory education. I was told prior to my arrival, once upon a time, it was in the hundreds of thousands, and we are less than 3,000 hours owed. We're in a very good place in terms of our responsiveness and communication to the State Department.
Great. The next section of the presentation, we're going to talk about the Urban Collaboratives audit. So before we move into that, if you have questions about the information that we've just shared.
We go back to that one slide.
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure I understood what you said. The 3,818 students, it says they're in BPS.
Bridgeport Public Schools.
Right. So that does not include the out-of-district placement or charter.
It actually does. That is an error that you caught, and thank you.
I just wanted to make sure I understood it, because I thought that's what you said.
Yes, that,
They were included,
yes, they
but
are.
up there it says in Bridgeport Public Schools, and I just wanted to be clear that those students are included. So that's about 800. So we have about 3,000 in the district that we're taking care of.
Yes, but like I said, that could look very different in a few weeks because you have students that are recommended for services
Yes.
at all times. But
Yes.
yes.
And then the compensatory hours?
Mhm.
Could you explain that to me?
So we had, and this is also coming out of the pandemic. Whenever we are unable to provide direct services, perhaps because there was, we were operating without a related service individual certified to focus on the area of need of the student and or a special education teacher, we're required to make up those hours.
So it's makeup time.
Yes,
I got it. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Mr.
Next slide.
Sokolovic?
Yes, can you explain what the ombudsperson does and how they operate?
The ombuds, yes. So she is really a partner in the process to families that are trying to navigate the this whole experience as it relates to special education. Oftentimes you have parents that are starting the process with lots of questions and concerns just about what to expect when you're at a PPT. Help me understand what an IEP is. That individual is there really to support the families and be that liaison if they are also new to the district in terms of identifying who would be a support and what the roles of those individuals would be when you attend the PPT at the various schools.
Aren't they also like an advocate if there's a disagreement between services not being provided, such as a hospital ombudsman?
Their role is to advocate and support for our parents and really just be that bridge when there's a misunderstanding or lack of understanding.
Another example, it's a very critical role, and as Ms. Johnson said, a partner. Just last week, there was a family that was going through a manifestation PPT, determine if the child's primary disability was at all impactful in a disciplinary consequence, and also to review the IEP to determine that the school has implemented the IEP with fidelity. And so the ombudsperson played a role to help support the manifestation determination process, and also ultimately the student was moved towards an expulsion proceeding. And the ombudsperson stayed with the family and met with me during that process, and was very helpful and I think reassuring to the family. So a really key role and a significant part of the team.
And who do they report to?
Report to Ms. Johnson.
I have a question. How many ombuds are available in the district, and are they multilingual, like for services for families that don't speak English?
Unfortunately, we only have one, and she is bilingual.
But to go back.
Mr. Traber,
Sokolovic's-
recognize,
Thank
I
you.
noticed that it was getting out of order with, I recognize who speaks, just Robert's rules. Okay, you can speak. That's it.
No, I waited. So, but ultimately what Mr. Skolovic asked is, the ombudsperson is to be an advocate for the family,
Yes.
in lieu of, or do they work, if a family brings in their own counsel, does the ombudsperson get involved?
No.
That's what I thought. That's sort of fairly common,
Mhm.
but it's sort of like you can have the help of the ombudsperson we're providing, or you can get your own.
If you think about the process and stages, oftentimes that ombudsman is like your introduction to that initial stage in the process. And then when families do decide to bring on their own, advocates or supports, there's that transition that happens.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? Mr. Jelen, Mr. Skalvik, Jelen?
Yes, good evening again. Just a follow-up regarding the ombudsperson. Is this, I know it's only one, is it only for the initial encounter or is it ongoing? And how many encounters would you say the ombudsperson has had, say, throughout the school year? Is it, with all the IEP students, or some of them, the majority of them? Because it seemed to me, thinking about it, it seemed could be overwhelming for one person. This question, I'm just things that are going through my mind.
Mhm. That's a very good question. I do not have the stats. It can be ongoing. There are some families that she supports all throughout and every year in preparation of PPTs. They work together to make sure that there is understanding. With that being said, our parents typically initiate that process. And then there are many families who feel comfortable just moving forward with the school teams without her. It varies.
And does this ombudsperson have any other role in the school district, or this is the person's only role?
This is her primary role. She has been most recently instrumental in also communicating to families the fact that we have this upcoming professional training for families. So she is very supportive in being that liaison and family engagement as well.
Next slide.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this segment of the presentation, we'll talk about our work with the Urban Collaborative. And so they started working with us late in October, met with Ms. Johnson and I virtually every week from October through really the end of February. They came into the district November 16th to 18th and had a comprehensive visit. They had a structure to meet with board members, to meet with parents, and they had a tremendous parent turnout. Considering some of our struggles with parent engagement, we had over 25 parents come to a session at Central High School to talk about their services and their experiences. They observed went to 8 schools and observed classrooms in 8 schools. Met with the leadership team, the executive team. So a lot of data was collected, and ultimately they worked with Ms. Johnson and I to better understand the data that they were receiving, and also to try and make meaning of their anecdotal data and their observations while they were in district. And so they presented to our leadership team last Monday virtually. And so tonight begins sort of our efforts to begin talking more globally with our stakeholders about the results of this audit and the implications for teaching and learning across the district. And I think one of the things that you'll find, or would be our hope and intention tonight as you listen to us and grapple with the information and ask questions, that you'll hear some parallels with the next steps and the professional learning and the language that you heard from both Mr. Planas and Dr. Jenkins and Mr. Henry, which is, one of the big pieces of this is creating opportunities for all kids to learn. And that the audit really has shown that our students who are identified with special needs have been less included in the general education environment and need more opportunities to be included. And that, by and large, the district has been structured in a way where special education is a place, it's not a service. And so as we embark on this continuous improvement effort, a key component to recognize is that special ed does not fix special education. That general education, and all of us focusing on tier 1, which you heard tonight, the WIN program, the What I Need, the multi-tiered system of student supports, all of that is the work that we need to do to support all learners, inclusive of multi-language learners and children with special needs. Next slide. So the Urban Collaborative identified three broad areas of strength. The first one that they really resonated was the staff commitment to our students. And they spoke quite positively about the quality and dedication of our teachers and paraprofessionals. And they also spoke about our building principals and their respective commitment to keeping students with disabilities within their classrooms and schools. And so they further defined that in their meetings with our building principals, they heard a strong sense of efficacy, a belief that they could lead this work, and that there was a high degree of awareness of the need for change, and that they were looking for district systemic approach to school improvement, especially as it relates to Tier 1, which is general classroom instruction. And so they also identified strengths at the district level, that the cabinet leaders are collaborative and capable of making these instructional decisions. A key component here is that we are able to access data and receive reports and disaggregate data. And so that's critical because it helps us to monitor growth, which is what you heard in the math presentation, the science presentation, and the ELA presentation. And so that system to access data is important. And certainly we are a district that believes in improvement science and really is working to develop foundations for continuous improvement. So in that respect, these were the strengths that the Urban Collaborative identified through their work. Next slide.
So while the Urban Collaborative has helped us in identifying strengths, there were also challenges and areas that we need to have a laser focus on to improve and ensure that our students are successful and experience and experience one that is robust and the same as their general education peers. Areas of focus, beginning with the first bullet, the student experience. One area that they highlighted in their findings is that students with disabilities lack access to core standards, peer experiences due to a significant amount of time in self-contained programs. There just isn't enough opportunities for inclusions and learning with typical peers. Special education and procedural compliance was a second area of concern. What they highlighted for us was that there is an imbalance in the district in terms of an overemphasis on compliance versus building an inclusive culture throughout the district. Under the next bullet, parental and student rights, were you going to say? Yeah. Oh, under parental and student rights, what they've communicated to us is that the district needs to improve in this area. While we've made gains, we need to include parents even more in educational decisions and ensure that our students are included in the educational process. For starters, ensuring that students age 12 and up are invited to PPTs and understanding what their goals and objectives look like in ways that they learn best to ensure success.
I could just add to that. So having children age 12 and up be involved, that's one of the compliance reports, indicator 13, that the state has told us we need to improve on. So the Urban Collaborative recognized some of this as well and reported out on it, and we're working on it. And as Ms. Johnson explained, June 8th, we have a training in that area. One of the other pieces that the Urban Collaborative was able to identify as it related to parents and student rights was that our parents who are non-English speaking felt more disenfranchised than parents who were English speaking. And so it really does speak to our ongoing need and efforts, in recruitment and retention and hiring to hire bilingual educators, but also in all of our communication and materials and support materials to make sure that it's accessible for our families.
Mm-hmm. Under provision of services, one thing that the Urban Collaborative highlighted is that there is a lack of shared vision of inclusion across the district for students, and our transition services, which is our programming for students 18 to 22, is a bit underdeveloped and need of systemic change to create a system that is more robust. In terms of teaching and learning, they highlight that our professional development opportunities need to be more inclusive. Again, as you see, there's a theme here. They want to ensure that we are providing as many opportunities as possible for our general education teachers and special education teachers to be exposed to the same professional training. The next area of concern in terms of structural challenges, they highlighted that our collaboration is not a priority, and that we have a very rigid financial control structure, which can prohibit provisions of LRE. This basically means that our service delivery models need to be looked at. We need to reimagine how we deliver and provide supports to students, and also take into consideration it is a contribution to burnout and high turnover with the model that exists now. Last but not least, a concern relates to the academic achievement of students with disabilities. They highlighted 2 data points for us. One example had to do with our 4th graders. 7% of our students in a 4th grade are considered proficient readers. When you're looking at students with disabilities, they felt that percentage was significantly low when compared to students without IEPs. Another example that they pulled out for us is that 3% of our 8th graders are considered proficient readers. With these areas of challenge, our next step is to move forward as a task force to identify how we would address these areas and identify a timeline that we can communicate and begin to provide and move forward with the changes that are necessary for us to make the gains that we need to do.
Correct. So next slide. Thank you. So, key recommendations coming out of this report are creating a culture of collaboration with families of students with disabilities. So that really focuses on relationship building, engagement, outreach, and it's the work of all, not just the special education department, not the FUDS person, but all of us creating that culture of collaboration with families of students with disabilities. Part of what can make this so exciting too is as we reimagine a continuum of services and our service delivery model, it presents the opportunity for students with a disability to be educated in their neighborhood school, in their home school. We have many children who are not. And as we begin this work of building an inclusive culture, as you know, the significant benefits of having children staying with their peer group in their neighborhood, in the community where they worship, where they play flag football, where they participate in block parties, they should be going to school in that same setting. And so this is, part of our vision of continuous improvement. Doesn't happen overnight, but, there are some structural components that we are working on to get there. The other piece, the second bullet, is, just near and dear to every executive sitting in this room, which is providing students with disabilities access to the general education curriculum, to a rigorous, high quality, standards-based teaching and learning experience. And so that is critical. That will be our one way that the board will know that we're moving on this, is not only to ask for reports, but to recognize in the future, when asking for like an ELA update, we will be able to show you the DIBELS report in the ELA update for students who have a disability. And there are challenges right now. As I said, special ed is viewed as a place, not a service. And so when we're administering these tests, we even have a hard time finding out who's administering the test to the student who has a disability. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done on creating a culture of inclusion. And that's some of our next level work. And the last, 3 bullets are pretty straightforward in terms of being able to provide consistent and equitable and effective special ed practices all across the district. That's foundational to improvement, and following the legal process as well and making sure that we do that. And so our next steps, next slide. Tonight, we're beginning the unpacking of recommendations. We've done that last week. We will continue to do this more in depth with our leaders. We need to consider opportunities to partner with outside coaches and consultants. A big emphasis of our next level work is inclusion and transition. Again, transition, as Ms. Johnson said, is for children who receive services from 18 to 22 years. We need to identify an implementation team and then develop a timeline and implementation and benchmarks, how we know that we're getting better. So this work is deeply connected to all the ongoing work in literacy and mathematics and science, and also social emotional learning and restorative practices, because as we look at data, we know that chronic absenteeism amongst our students with disabilities is also high. We know suspension is, there's an over predominance of children with special education being suspended. So all of this really requires a deep focus on SEL, literacy, inclusion, and restorative practices. So it's district level work. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. A lot to unpack. So same order, as start with committee members and then we'll go around to the rest of the board. Mr. Traber.
Yeah, I'll sort of go backwards from comments. I was outside coaches,
So
subcontracted services, or?
yeah, professional services, we'd have to, go through the process, determine if it's, the size of the contract, whether it needs to be board approved or not. But there are obviously, whether it's CES or Capital Region Education Council, whether it's, so those are RESCs, those are Regional Education Service Centers that have an arm for professional learning, and they have extended in that arm, they have a pretty good reach around special education. So we might contract with them. There may be other professionals who've done specific and targeted work in the area of transition that we would want to work with, and we would fill out sole source provider if that were the case. And so that is the work that we're engaged in right now, is really trying to accelerate some work in inclusion and transition.
And you mentioned specifically burnout and high turnover, but you didn't attribute exactly what was causing that. I have my understandings, but I was curious what you would say.
There are many things that I think are contributing to that. It is not an easy task that special education teachers have. And CT SEDS didn't make any of it all the more easy. But when unpacking all of this with Urban Collaborative, we do have many self-contained programs that are, they all vary. And it is challenging for one individual to primarily be responsible for all of the subjects and needs of the students who also present with various exceptionalities. We really have been operating with two models, especially at the elementary level, and it is been one or the other without really a lot of in between. And it is also a challenge when you have, we're fortunate to have some schools where there are continuums that exist and there are a variety of teachers that do what you do. But unfortunately, throughout our schools, we have a teacher of a specialized program off on an island of their own. And based on their communication and feedback to the Urban Collaborative, it's daunting and challenging. It leads to high burnout and or altogether.
Can you articulate those two models for the sake of this presentation?
So one model is functioning as a self-contained teacher. You are the teacher of the students with behavior problems. You are the teacher of the students who struggle or have comprehensive medical needs. Or you are the teacher that pretty much functions as a resource teacher, where you have students that funnel in and out to you throughout the day to focus on an area of reading or math. Right.
Hold on.
Right.
That's what I thought you meant. Clear for the sake of the rest of the board members, but also that, so not a lot of push in.
Yes.
Okay, and then last, well, actually, a little question, ASU?
Arizona State University.
It is ASU, okay, that was my guess, but it was like, okay, the only ASU I could come up with. Then the question that we discussed the other night, that I discussed in several of these, interpreters I heard would be useful, having access to more interpreters. I understand how having bilingual teachers would help, but interpreters in general would help with regard to the non-English speaking families that are affected by these processes.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all areas in which if we could access more resources, we could provide greater service.
Mm-hmm. And layers of on-site support to teachers that look different. Having someone solely available to you when you're a brand new teacher who specializes and or can focus on the practice or the exceptionality of who you are working with day to day and or working in an urban setting is huge. Having to navigate all of that on your own without someone to coach and help you support and navigate curriculum and all the other things that, you know, come along with working within the realm of special education is a challenge.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kolovec?
Yes, a couple of questions. You mentioned some sort of financial constraints and challenges in providing services. What, can you elaborate on that a little further, please?
You know, I think broadly, you know, we have pretty strict and formulaic allocation models, right? Staffing allocation. And it doesn't really contemplate what Ms. Johnson was saying earlier, sort of the transition, the fluidity of the ins and outs, and that sometimes we have children who join us who have significant disabilities who live in one neighborhood, and the team would say they need something specific, and it's much harder for us to take the steps to move in the direction of how do we implement this IEP. And so it's, you know, it's rigid, and we have to work to sort of create different vision of how we allocate staff and partner with the business office and the CFO to make sure that we're getting every student in every setting what he or she needs.
And as far as, and we know there's a disproportionate amount of money spent per student for special education. Even with that, we still need more. Do we need more money to meet the essential need? Let's break it down between essential and mandated, state mandated requirements. Are we funding enough to meet that minimum? The bare minimum, I'm not saying the proper minimum, just the bare minimum by law.
Dr. Baldwin, do you mind?
No, I don't mind.
I think probably the best way to answer that is really dependent upon students' exceptionality in their needs. So we can't say what the essential services are unless we've identified what those needs are, and they look different for every student. So to the overall answer will be yes, we definitely need more to provide the services. So say, for instance, you have a child who has special education needs who may need a one-to-one, but their specific needs look different than what we typically assign that to. So we're trying to get to a place where we're able to have the funding sources available to be able to do that. And right now, we are not in that position.
All right, let me follow up on that. Basically what I'm looking for is an answer to the question if Ms. Johnson, say we got a projected budget of I'll just throw some numbers out there, $2 million. You reach that $2 million budget, but you have a new student that requires services. Will you be able to get that additional money out of the budget office to service that child above $2 million? That's a mandated service by law.
Yes.
Okay.
We are able to do that, you know, and I think.
I just want to make sure we're
I
not
think the
skirting.
CFO is gifted at, you know, finding ways to make sure that that happens. Yes, that's less of the challenge. I think to how Ms. Perrin responded, mandated services look really different. We understand what you're asking. I think in general, our work, we may find that there are steps that we take in this journey of improvement that will perhaps save dollars. And in that savings, we may be able to, as we re-envision, redeploy dollars. And so it's, you know, somewhat cost neutral, but it's leading towards better. And then in time, you know, you saw the number of out of district placements. In time, as we're able to have more children accessing opportunities to learn in the general education setting, and we can demonstrate that we have built a strong multi-tiered system of supports and the means to collect data and report out on student performance, parents will be happy to have their children come back when they know that we can specifically give them what they need and report on student success. And so those are some costs that will definitely be offset. That can be used in other ways, in other areas of the district.
Right. Yeah, the basis for that question was basically in a historical perspective, because in the past we have as a district, gotten in trouble for not funding those mandated districts, the mandated requirements.
The IEP.
Yeah, the IEPs and all that, and it's because that's one of the biggest parts of the budget. And the temptation is when you're in financial trouble is to look at the biggest line items of what special ed is. And I just want to make sure we do not go down that road, especially with budget cuts coming up. And we must maintain our mandated services, which we didn't always do. So, I mean, it's no aspersions on anybody here, but it has been something that's happened in the past in the district, and we've gotten into a lot of trouble for it. My next question, did this study or audit look at our out-of-district school students too as well, or are they just the ones that are attending traditional public schools here?
As part of their review, they pulled some IEPs. They looked at our schools here, 8 schools. They looked into our classrooms.
Sampling.
Yes, like some SOAR classrooms, some AIM classrooms, different self-contained RISE classrooms. They did not visit out-of-district placements. They may have heard from parents of students who were placed out of district. We did do survey data. And so we have survey data from the parents as well. And so that would include parents of children who were out of district placement, but they did not do a deep dive per se on charters or out of district.
And the reason I ask about out of district, especially out of district, is because those are very, very expensive placements. And how are we checking up to see if their needs have been met and we can bring them back in districts and to a more less restrictive environment and a less expensive environment? Because if they're making money for these out of district placements, is there some incentive for them to keep them when they're less?
So very good question. They are reviewed annually, the same way we would monitor our students here. There are some students that do return, some age out. It really is case by case, depending on the need of the student and what that particular setting provides that perhaps we are not equipped to do.
Right. Okay, final question. You mentioned something about ELL, parents of ELL students having a little bit more trouble assessing services and not feeling inclusive. Could that, because English language learners, I like to think of them like basically dual language speakers. They're speaking two languages. They may be more proficient in one language than another. Is there possibly any implicit biases that go into some of these things, and maybe we could benefit some implicit bias training in our?
So one of the, what was reported was that parents whose first language is not English felt more disenfranchised from the process. So it didn't specifically say that they were parents of children who were multi-language learners and identified. However, I think your question is a good one and is relevant to what the data is showing. And I think in all of our work around building an inclusive culture, we have to do continued work in addressing implicit bias.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Mr. Jolin?
Thank you again. I have a quick one question regarding the teachers. I know was one of the slides indicated that that's the ratio or the should be 12 to about 15 students. In many cases, there are 20 students. How often does that happen? And is that something that's consistently happening? Is it maybe, happen maybe for, a few weeks? I know the students come in and out quite a bit. And you find you get to the ratio that's ideal. Just wanted to explore that a bit.
Sure. So the 12 to 15 is an average. The 20 or more is also something that you would see. What you have to keep in mind, like I shared, there are really special education teachers operating in one of two examples that I shared. If you are the special education teacher servicing students in a self-contained setting, your caseload is going to be lower than a special education teacher in your same building who is functioning as the resource room teacher. That really is the difference in the range.
Oh,
Is it?
hey,
Thank you.
Is it?
hey, wasn't sure if he was done.
No, I was not asking another.
Does that clarify what that slide meant?
It does clarify that. Thank you. And one just follow-up question just regarding the our parents are not English speaking. What resources are we exploring to ensure that they are more involved and they are just understanding a bit of what's happening to their children or their child who need this service? I know one of my colleagues mentioned interpreters. Are we looking at any, aside from instructors who speak the language, are we looking at any resources or, assistance to help bridge that gap?
So I think that's twofold. On the one hand, we do have to provide more supports to ensure that there are individuals present at meetings that can translate and ensure that parents fully understand the process. In addition to that, training and education is paramount. And while we have been offering professional development trainings, I think they need to be a bit more extensive and focused on critical areas that families just want to know more about. Very similar to like a parent university where you have several topics that fall under this umbrella of special education, where an individual would maybe experience a particular topic more than once, or there's a phase one, a phase two to really internalize what their child is experiencing day to day, allowing them to feel more equipped to be partners in the process. And that is something we are exploring. In the interim, I do participate in all of our PTAC meetings and use that as an opportunity to review various topics as it relates to special education, and also go and provide or facilitate trainings at various schools based on what their, parent associations are looking for. But we do have to take a step back and really give some consideration to what content area, what specific areas parents are looking for, and making sure that we formalize that training over the course of the year.
And there's also a company that the district contracts with currently called Linguistica, which does provide interpretation services. And so, that is a pathway that to some extent can help to ameliorate the challenge that parents of children with special needs, or all parents may have, with accessing information. And so certainly we need to develop a stronger system around accessing the translation supports.
Mr. Traber?
Yeah, I only wanted to add, in my experience, that one of the other factors that affect the caseload that you were describing would be the work required by the IEP. So schools are adjusting the assignment of students based on the amount of work each student's IEP requires. And so there will be adjustments made within schools, especially the larger ones, where that's a factor.
Good thing is me and most of my colleagues were on the same page. A few of my questions were already asked and answered. So I'll just go off what I have left. The parent meeting at Central, where we did have a good turnout, were out of district placement parents and charter parents invited to it?
Yes, they were invited.
All right. My next question is, it was a mention of a task force to identify areas. I'm going to just say growth. That may have not been used specifically, but the task force, at this time, do we have an idea of who's going to be involved with the task force in a district-wide effort? It doesn't have to be like we have these people set out now, but it's in the planning stage, of course, because this audit has just happened. But
it is in the planning stage. And so, and Ms. Johnson and I were just talking today about that. And so we envision leaders in general education, such as the chief academic officer, because so much work has to be done with building an inclusive bilingual in world language, speech. We're thinking counseling. We're thinking about parent representation so that it's fully transparent and inclusive. And so we're thinking about membership and composition, and then we're thinking about role and task.
then my last question is, this goes again with like the inclusive environment and I guess the inclusivity for our students, because they didn't feel part of the school environment. And I was really thinking, we just had students at our regular board meeting talking about the social emotional impact of not being around each other and advocating from their position for a senior trip, just the bond as a cohort, because they're about to graduate. I guess, yeah, there is that common knowledge of like students being pulled out and special ed place, not a service while you're part of the rest of the population. So just for someone that may not have too much knowledge of it, like how, and maybe that's part of the creativity of thinking outside the box from what's being done now, but I guess I would love to know what that's going to, or how that could look.
Yeah. So to your point, it is going to look like less pullout and more opportunities to co-teach and provide experience within the generalized setting. Looking at or ensuring that our students are exposed to the same curriculum. The rate of achievement may vary, but the specialist would come in and maybe provide other strategies while working within the same curriculum that all of their peers are experiencing, to ensure that whatever they need to be successful is going to be appropriate. And I think, you know, there are times where academically students may be so far off, but we have to also ensure that we're providing enough social experiences, because that's equally as important for students to have with their typical peers as well.
And then Mr. Traber?
I would just add to that, that in my experience, the special ed teachers were very good at coordinating what they were trying to do with the child based on the IEP and the child's needs with the subject matter that we were teaching in my classroom. They were constantly asking me what we were doing, you know, and trying to help those students work on projects that were being done in the classroom. So,
I think your,
though they're being pulled out.
I think your interest and, desire for that inclusive culture, is well placed. And, this, if we could flip a switch, we would. It is, we need to, it is a systems issue, and we need to make sure that all teachers have appropriate professional learning to support greater inclusion of children with special needs in the general education environment. We need to make sure that we have opportunities for all students to have access to, whether it's the arts or athletics or clubs, all of that work. And so some real entry level work over the summer with our leadership team around inclusion and, what's our vision for inclusion, and then helping them to understand there might be some low level steps that they could take that could have a significant impact in the near term. So we're excited about this work.
Any questions from any other board or committee members? Seeing none, thank you both for your presentation. Right, we're going to move to the second to last item on the agenda, which is just a presentation on content taught in high schools, preparing our youth, young adults to transition out of the school system. Is that you?
It is not.
It is.
It is
Who's
Dr.
presenting?
Paul,
Come on.
Dr. Jenkins.
There you go. Thanks, Dr. Jenkins.
I do not have a PowerPoint, but I do have several notes to share. To address the question about how we are preparing our students to transition from high school into college and career, we have been working on developing a system through student success plans. Each student in grades 6 through 12 has a student success plan. It's a digital plan that we use on a program called Zello. So each month, students start working on different aspects of career and college readiness. So for example, in grades 6 through 8, they begin the process of building a resume. And in grades 9, 10, and 11, the month of February, they all get an experience with refining their resume, updating their resume, and that's through the counseling department in the district. Another example is teach students engage in career awareness self-assessments, and that occurs across the district in grades 9 through 12, currently during the month of December. So they're constantly looking at different career path choices, and it builds over time. They take like career assessments. Another area through Zello students explore is their personality styles, understanding, and I'm just going to use, we don't use the DISC, but I'm going to use the DISC as an example. Do I have a dominant personality, inspiring, supportive, or cautious? We know from DISC that if you're inspiring or supportive, you're really more people oriented. If you're dominant and cautious, you're really task oriented. So helping young people in high school to understand their personality type, to match who they are as an individual with their career choices. And so that also helps with their career planning. And in the month of May, students in grades 9 through 12 will explore career factors. Factors such as, if I want to be a plumber, what are my hours? How would that impact my lifestyle? What are the cost factors? Based on what I want to obtain in life, and my salary allow me to obtain some of those goals. So they do some of that, career choice with lifestyle reflection. In addition, there are opportunities during the year for students to explore work-life balance. And of course, in mostly junior and senior year, students engage in resume writing, the interview process through Zello, development of cover letters. The only thing I thought about in reflection on this, I wonder how much exposure do students have with databases? So just talking to my own niece and nephews, they upload their resumes, they upload their cover letters to these Indeed sites. So I don't know if we provide that type of exposure. So that's something as a result of analyzing the landscape that I will inquire about. Do we show children how to use online tools? In regards to, you had asked about the voting process, making sure they have like civic awareness. Our students do learn about voting at the federal level, some state and local level. They explore civics through Constitution Day, Law Day. Each school does something slightly different, so there are individual supplemental opportunities. So at Central, they bring in the city registrar of voters. One of the thoughts in reflection on how we're making sure our students are civically ready is, one, I'm looking at making sure that landscape of supplemental opportunities are the same across all schools. And number two, civics is currently not a full semester, it's a half semester. Something that I'm going to explore to see if it can possibly be a full semester, because I think there's power in helping our young people understand who they are within their community and not just at the federal level, understanding state and local government voting and policies and procedures, because those laws actually affect our students more day to day than the federal. We are exploring the implementation of personal finance consistently, looking to develop a course in the future. However, most schools do something with personal finance, whether it's bringing in junior achievement, partnering with Wells Fargo or TD Bank for personal finance. There is a personal finance course within the business math at Aero. So again, with the supplemental opportunities that have emerged at individual schools, creating similar systems for everyone. There's one other area that I thought was very interesting that's been made available to all high school students in partnership with Bridgeport Caribe Youth Leadership. They offered a course this year on trade assessment preparation. And so I've spoken with our director of counseling to explore, is that something we can do in the district to make sure all children, because only some children participated in that assessment, and that trade assessment preparation is not a part of our Zello platform. Zello leans more towards college readiness and college entrance, but wondering how we can add a trade assessment preparation to our courses. Of course, Caribe offered college readiness program, but they also did a program for young entrepreneur leadership. Many students see through YouTube and people becoming influencers, they may think it's something you can do easily, but there's a lot of effort and hard work and commitment, discipline that's required. So those were 3 external programs offered to our students that I think we will need to consider adding to what we already have in place, through our student success plan process.
I'm going to start this a little bit differently because some of the stuff was procedurally updates from last year for this month's agenda. I met a student, an alumni of the Bridgeport School System that graduated last year. So it was great to actually catch up. And I was asked, well, where's your resume? I don't have a resume. Oh, and then I was asked by the student a question regarding the Board of Ed. And I was like, I made an assumption with civics. And I was like, well, yeah. And how does that work? And I was like, we must teach this in our schools. And I was like, you had to take civics. And I was like, we had to have taught you how to write a resume. So part of it was like, well, how, and this is a recent alum. So I was like, you just graduated last year. Excuse me. And that alum is from the military academy. And I was like, if we're preparing our students, there is a pathway, a good pathway to pay positions if you join the military after BMA. But if you don't understand your civic duty around, but you're going to serve the country, I thought that was a potential big gap. And so that's what really triggered me to put this as an agenda item, just so I understand. And sure, maybe other board members know more so than I do, but what we're offering at the district. And so that was just how this agenda item came into place. I will ask one more question because I'm familiar with all 3 programs through Bridgework Rebay. I've gone to them, but only at Central. Is it only available at Central High School, or is it they were district-wide but meeting at Central?
Right, they were located in Central but open to all children. But I thought they were unique programs that we need to make sure all children have access, especially the trade assessment, because that's a shortage here. That's not in our Excello platform, and the Young Entrepreneur Program.
And so I won't spend too much time, but those are great because I saw our high school students coming up with business plans, and I think that's good that we identify what we can grow on. I'll open it up to committee members and then.
I know, I laughed at one thing you said. I had 4th grade students showing me that they were YouTube entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And, as an old man, it was beyond me, but they were educating me as to how they had a business, and so had a business and a name. It was adorably cute, but they were serious. So I laughed when you said it because I was remembering when I said, what? But no, I think it's great. I taught civics in my 4th grade class as part of Black History Month and the Civil Rights Movement.
Mrs. Sapalvik?
Yeah, just one question. As far as the civics and the half semester course, my son did the half semester this last semester, and then they paired it with perspectives on race. Is that the case in all the half credit courses? So what would happen to the perspective of race? That's a half credit course if the other one's expanded to a full credit course.
That's why we would have to have conversations about the ripple effect with making a change. If perspectives on race, social studies teachers wanted to add more about how, government and race are intertwined. But I think that our students aren't getting the full complement of civics, and your son just went through it. So
Yeah,
I wondered, did he get state and local at an intense level?
not so
Right.
not so very intense, but he did have to name all the state legislators, our representatives in Congress, and federal president, and in the city council. But not us, not the Board of Ed.
Right. So that's why, I mean, I'm just reflecting on it. It's probably one of the most important courses, but it's a half a semester. And that's because we're on a semester schedule. At one point, it was half a year.
Oh.
So it was a full semester. So we reduced the course that will help you to navigate, the political landscape, social, economic landscape of this country.
Thank you.
Mr. Jellens?
No questions for me. Thank you. I just look forward to maybe seeing this course a full year one of these days. Thank you.
Mr. Traber?
Yeah, and or, I know you'll note we didn't have a social studies presentation tonight. And it's sort of like different teachers. So for me, what I did was different than necessarily my colleagues. So I would do an election in November. My kids would make campaign signs and speeches, and we'd discuss and we'd have nominations. We'd elect the class president, but they would all go around with their "I voted today" stickers too that I'd get from the registrar when I voted. But there's a way to weave some of this stuff into existing curriculum that would still be very useful to beginning to get kids understanding how it works.
Yes.
And that for me was fourth and fifth grade. I taught those 2 years, but it was still a part of what we did. And it was combined with a reading of a particular book that involved a class election in a class.
May I answer your question
Yeah.
about the senior or the recent graduate? We launched Zello last year with grades 9 through 12. And we noticed that all students weren't engaging with the platform. So this year, every half day, we call it Student Success Day. The effort was to increase engagement with these, college and career readiness activities. So I believe we're at about 75% engagement across grades 6 through 12, but there's still a 25% gap. So that's why when I make reference to systems, when we're collecting that data, we're missing 25% of the children. So what are our efforts as a district community to close that opportunity gap? So 25% of our students, and that may not be 11 or 12, because I don't have the numbers right now by grade. So always looking at making sure we're getting close to 100% of all of our 6 through 12 students having opportunities to use this platform and learn about what's available. So I think our launch last year wasn't as robust, but it is more robust, and we do have data by each school.
Okay. Seeing that there's no more questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Have a good night, everyone.
Oh.
Oh, and special thanks to Waltersville School. That's where we're at tonight.